companies to increase people's access to resources that they need to live. Like, every step towards my society means materially fewer people dying on a daily basis over time. So like, I don't know if that's really a fair question to ask. If you just want to ask me what the utilitarian calculus on it is, then I would just say the utilitarian good. But pragmatically, from a rule utilitarian perspective, I can't answer that question, because I would say there's probably no circumstance where it's a good idea to kill millions of people to achieve a good outcome. The rule you set in place with that is probably too damaging to all of future society.
That's a good dodge. Right, thanks so much.
I mean, sure, like, it's like saying you may as well. It's a troll. The reason I'm dodging is because it's a trolley problem, right? Like, I'm just gonna say, well, sure, whatever achieves the greatest outcome, but like, the trolley problem only works in a vacuum. In practice, like, people probably shouldn't be pulling that lever, because they don't actually know the state of what's going on. Unless you're like an expert in trolley operation, you probably shouldn't be making those decisions without,
what's up?
you know, with the potential for your ignorance about the situation. The tram driver might have things fully under control in a real non-vacuum trolley problem. Should you be fucking with that shit? Maybe you'll make things worse. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, your answers do make sense, and I'm glad that you actually seem to be honest about this, because most people I've talked to just, as I've said, it seems to be more of a religion to them. Like, they just want to get there no matter what.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are the authoritarians, right? Like, those are the guys who are this is like old-fashioned socialism or communism. Like, this idea of a vanguard that comes in and, like, dominates everything and then turns it into a benevolent dictatorship, and then very sweetly and kindly hands over the reins of power. Complete cope. Absolutely deranged. Never going to happen in a million years. Whereas, like, continued democratization, spreading power across more and more people, that's what I'm interested in, which is why when people ask me what I am, I don't say I'm a socialist, I don't say I'm a communist. I'll either say I'm an anti-capitalist and anti-statist, or, if it won't trigger them, an anarchist, because that is actually far closer to my beliefs, right? The gradual abolition of hierarchy. Democracy as a goal is so awful. Democracy is not my goal. If you read anarchist theory, Taftaj, you'll note that democracy is heavily critiqued by anarchists from day one. Rule by the majority is still an authoritarian rule over the minority.
That's actually a sort of a strange thing that I want to ask about. Is it fair to say that anarchism as a sort of ism isn't really a political system? It's more like an attitude, a direction towards government of always be skeptical to this. Is this a fair?
Yeah, that's actually a very good. That's a good take on it. It's not complete, but that's more accurate than most takes. Absolutely, yeah. Like it was originally conceived as like a
Lee Kuan Yew seems pretty based.
It was considered like
not gonna lie,
a scientific politics, right? Like trying many things, researching, allowing people to split off into groups that they opt into to understand what works best, come together, achieve consensus, kind of like the scientific peer review process.
If you read into like Singaporean
over time
history and look at like I don't want to
just as it's done through scientific.
If you look into like Singaporean history, it's like a literal list of like what exactly you should do if you're in that position of like having a small nation.
What would you say is like who would you say is a socialist in the last century that you actually agree with, if any?
Zizek is probably closest, though I still disagree with him on a lot. But yeah, I think Zizek is not too far off. He does have slightly more authoritarian tendencies that I'm comfortable with, but he justifies those authoritarian tendencies by critiquing democracy kind of similarly to the way I did, which is that in a democracy you have like you have an inherent permission to use your power however you want. Whereas, like, so he speaks to, like, the Singaporean authoritarian model, where, like, the authoritarian government in Singapore actually pays more attention and aligns its policies with its society more closely because it's more fearful of being overthrown because it knows its power is illegitimate. Whereas a democratic power has an inherent legitimacy that can then be leveraged to do more potential evil. He's obviously critical of the Singaporean government as well, and so am I. But he has slightly more a more nuanced take on authoritarianism than I do. I'm a bit more teetotal against it.
I see. Well, thanks so much for talking about this. I'm gonna hop off now, not hog off all your time. All right.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one. Thanks for coming around, buddy.
Thanks so much.
Today we're doing reasonable bug. All right. Taftash, didn't you just say you wanted more democracy? Yeah, so like in the short term, democratization of like, so like right now corporations are authoritarian structures, and I would like those to be democratized in the same way that I would like to take a kingdom and turn it into a democracy. Over time, I would like a form of democracy. Fuck, I can't remember what it's called. I guess they used to call it like the General Assembly. A form of democracy that doesn't inflict the majority rule on the minority. Classical democracy. Classical democracy? I don't know, like democracy. The democracy as we understand it today. If 51% of the people vote for something, 49% of the people are fucked, right? That's just the world they live in now, and that's not inherently fair. It's pragmatic and practical today. It's a better system than we had previously, but it's still not a system that actually involves democracy by poll. I don't know what you mean by that. You can hop in the Discord and ask if you want, if you're up to chat. Yeah, direct democracy like that is the worst. Oh, right, yeah. So like the majority, yeah, exactly. Whereas in an anarchist structure like a General Assembly, the idea is, let's say that 51% of the people vote for one thing and 49% of the people vote for the other. Well, the 49% of the people can then decide to opt in or out. You could even have a vote to decide, and the idea of this, of course, is reliant on there being more time and education, which, in the same way that you can't...
Schneef pure ideology, schneef commodity fetishism, schneef dialectical material.
True, but also fuck you. In the same way that you can't flip Soviet Russia into a democracy
without a join his Discord. What the fuck?
You need to be able to achieve a certain level of cultural progress and education in order to reach a democracy that works. And anarchism requires another level of education above that, right? But the idea is that 49% can split off and do something else, or everyone can vote and say, okay, let's all vote. Depending on we only have this finite resource. We can only pick one option of these two things. Let's all vote, and if we all vote to agree that whatever we pick, everyone does, then that's a consent to the hierarchy. That's an opt-in. The minority is saying, okay, we'll be disappointed, but we will still contribute our labor to this. But if it's too contentious, then they can say, if we don't get the vote that we want, we're not going to...
No, I just want... DGGL. So true. So true. I love DGG. Okay, Smugbug.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Okay, so democracy. It doesn't sound like democracy is an end goal. I don't think
I don't know how to pop this out. Oh, that's awkward.
It's usually not an end goal, I think, for most people. I don't have super long to talk about this.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Wait, can you not hear me?
Because I can't hear you.
Oh, no. All right, let's try this. Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can't. Oh, well, that's fine.
What the fuck?
Sabotage.
Hello?
Hello, how you doing?
Okay. I don't have super long to talk, but I do want to know what your sort of end is, what your end goal is. If it's not democracy, I think most people don't have democracy as an end goal, but I think that for a lot of left-wing people, the removal of hierarchy is one of like the main values, and democracy is kind of the a version of that.
I think of democracy more as a accountability structure to remove bad hierarchies rather than abolition of hierarchy itself.
Okay, interesting.
So like the idea is you're supposed to have a power structure which is democratic that you can then use to dismantle a hierarchy that would otherwise be unable to be dismantled from within itself, which is one of the reasons why anarchists talk about dual power, right? You've got like multiple democratic structures that can impose will on each other to make sure that none of them become too powerful to not be dismantled by any external force.
Yeah, have you ever heard like the voice analysis, like the voice and choice analysis of politics?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, okay. You might like recognize it as I describe it to you, but basically, I think that democracy can be like
Sure.
a good tool and that allows people to have voice in like their organizations. So like if you're in the United States and you don't have the ability to like leave whenever you want to have like some input on the decisions that are made that are going to affect you. And I think that democracy can be like a way to hold in check power so that people who are using the levers of power do not use it to be like horribly destructive. So I guess we have a sort of similar analysis of democracy in this way.
Yeah, but at least based on our previous conversation, I get the impression that you want that to be like feedback and input at the higher levels, but you ultimately want the supposedly greater educated or experienced or expert people at the top to make the final decision without leaving that decision to democracy, right?
I mean, maybe.
Is that fair?
It kind of depends. I think that like there are ways to set this up that would be quite good, but they need like some other method of including like skin in the game for people, right? So like there needs to be like some very direct punishment and reward mechanism for people who are making decisions if it's not democracy. And there are ways to do that, but yeah, I've got to get going.
Okay, all right, no worries.
Right,
Good chat and have a good one. Bye-bye.
A cool guy. All right. We are going to do a little chat, a little interview with Democratic candidate Gregory Hardin II. Oh. Ooh. Oh.
Recording in progress.
Hey.
Hey,
What's up, buddy?
how are you? I'm doing
good.
good, sorry.
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna pin you and put you on my stream, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that you were also streaming as well, but
Yeah, if that's all
cool.
right.
No, that's cool. How many people usually like how many people are watching you usually?
Not that many. Yeah, right now maybe I have like 40, 50.
Okay. That's not bad. No, I've been in a panic all day getting ready for doing interviews for the first time in like months. So it's like, oh, I also have to write down questions and stuff too. Well, but yeah.
You look pretty young. You're running for office, right?
I was.
You were.
Yeah, um I'll be 25 next month.
Okay, so a little bit older than me, actually.
Oh, I'm older than you? Okay, I
You
thought you were
are.
older than me this whole time.
I am 22.
Okay. Well, you appear in your conversations with Destiny, you seem like late 20s at least.
Mm.
I was thinking like 27 or 28.
Yeah, I think you've got the baby face.
Oh yeah. And the black face. Not that I'm
The
wearing
blackface.
blackface, but
Whoa,
like
okay.
well,
All right.
well, they say black don't crack,
Right.
Like black people age well. It's that.
Bro, okay, I finally got Zoom to display your image. I don't know why Zoom is so fucky, but you're now visible for my stream.
Okay.
Yeah, what's up? What do you want to talk about?
Well, first I'm gonna because this is pre-recorded on my end, I'm gonna
Do some
do
editing.
the show intro. I'm gonna do the show intro. So hello, I'm Gregory Hardin II, and this is the Green Corner Rebellion show. Today I am here with Taftage, who is a streamer on Twitch and also does OnlyFans and
Posts nudes.
exactly. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
That's good. Yeah. So I don't know. I had a few questions. I didn't write anything down, but I want to start with like the weirdest one because it's like been in my head for a long time. So I'm black. You are
Oh,
trans.
true.
So I usually say to people, so I'm a substitute teacher. Occasionally I'll meet kids, high school age kids, they're trans, and the role sheet doesn't match their preferred name, right? So they have to tell me what their pronouns are, what their name is. And so for me personally, I feel like if I misgender them or I dead name them, I feel like that is the equivalent of like calling a black person the N-word. Is that accurate, or is that like kind of not quite analogous?
I mean, I've never been called the N-word, so I guess it's hard for me to guess on that end. But I don't think so. I mean, like, we can look at like culturally how people feel about both of these things. I think being misgendered is kind of like inevitable in a lot of ways. Like, it happens, accidents happen, and a lot of trans people are just, they understand that, like, if they're coming out, they know that some people are going to make mistakes. And I think it's healthy to like recognize that you can make a mistake and misgender someone without having any malice. I think it's probably pretty unlikely to like accidentally call a black person the N-word.
Hey, you'd be surprised.
There's that guy in Hawaii, right, who was like, "Hey neighbor," and just messed it up.
Yeah.
But I mean, besides that, I don't think that anyone had. I've never heard someone accidentally use the N-word. So
True, but I mean, like, how to say this? But if someone intentionally misgendered someone, wouldn't you say that would have the same like effect and intention behind it as someone calling a black person the N-word? So I guess in this instance,
maybe.
it'd be more about the intention than it is the actual act itself.
Maybe. I don't know. I could see that. Like, in theory, you could have someone who's like has the same hate in their heart when they use, a slur versus when they misgender a trans person. This one's plausible. I don't think that's like the average case, but yeah, could happen.
Because usually whenever I say that to people, they're like, "Whoa, that's like offensive to say that to black people." I'm like, but I'm gonna say it anyway. It's basically the same. But yeah, I don't know. It's I know that personally, whenever I accidentally misgender a student, I feel horrible. Like, I can't accidentally call someone the N-word. I can only do it on purpose and feel great about it, because I'm black.
Of course.
But but I also know that, like, it's an accident, or it could be an accident. So the student's not always going to take it as me or another person doing it on purpose. But yeah. Because I guess the only other non-intentional equivalent to someone saying the N-word would be like how a lot of white kids or younger white people or even Latinos, they'll say the N-word, kind of like how rappers do it, right? But then if a black person who's not used to white people just flippantly saying the N-word hear it, they probably aren't going to think, "Oh, they're not intending it to be that way, so therefore I shouldn't receive it in a negative way." even if they're not even saying it to me.
I've known white women in my life who dated black guys and thought that they had the pass to say the N-word. So I think I know like archetypes of these people who will defend use of the N-word even when it makes everyone else very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Like, because I've seen, because I remember whenever I was in high school, it wasn't like a whole bunch of white kids doing it, but it was a few. And I would say something to them like, you shouldn't say that, blah, blah, blah. But like, I wouldn't like call them racist or anything like that. And then eventually, as we got older, they stopped doing it,
You know, it was a
because they grew up.
crazy
Yeah.
realization for me. I was
hmm
talking with some of my friends like a while ago, maybe like 8 months ago. And there is this realization that like a lot of them, I think I said something like, it's crazy to me that like people are just like going around saying the N-word, or that like that's like in people's vernacular. And three of my friends all had like reasons why they had like said the N-word in the past. And one of them was like, I grew up in a black school, and another one was just like, I was like friends with a lot of black people or something. Another person just had like a totally insane reason, which I won't recite now. But it's not
They
like
were in the
it
Klan.
wasn't like
No.
racist. It's just like very very like autistic reason. But that like blew my mind because I was like, what the fuck? Like all these people who are, by the way, like much more liberal and progressive than me, all like had this experience. And yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah,
Sure.
because I understand 100%. Like personally, for me, like I don't have any white friends that say the N-word around me or anything. It's not anything that I was ever really accepting of growing up. I never said it growing up either, really. But I understand the idea of a white kid growing up with black kids in black areas, and they all just kind of say it, and they're all cool with that. I might not agree with it, but I understand the context in which they have grown up being okay with that. Like Eminem was that way, right? Like there's even songs that Eminem used the N-word in back in the day before he became famous, like way back in the early 90s. But it's, and so I can understand that. I just don't understand how anyone else outside of those types of contexts really get away with saying it when they have no black friends or they don't know any black people like
Well,
even adjacent to them that say it, because
I think I have
to
a
me,
theory, okay?
yeah,
This is my theory. It's a spectrum. And if you have like a ton of black friends and they're all saying it around you, that might cause you to say it. And if you have
yeah,
no black friends, like you're just only surrounded by white people, that might cause you to say it. And it's like the people in the middle who are like, they know a few black people, they're like in a progressive community, and like no one says it. That's my theory.
yeah, like it's funny because hearing, because I'm a substitute teacher, I substitute teach at some schools that are majority Latino. I get to hear Latinos say it,
Mhm.
and I'm like, whoa, like I know that, like I've heard of this, like Latino kids saying the N-word, but like actually hearing them do it, and in between using Spanish too, speaking Spanish, I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. And then occasionally there'll be some black kids in the room, and I'm like, hey, how do you feel about them saying it? They're like, we're not okay with that. But because they're in the minority,
Right.
they don't really feel like they could really ever say anything about it, because it's like, oh, I mean, they're gonna just do what they do, and it's odd to like look at, and it's kind of funny. But I will say though, the only kind of uses of the N-word I'll defend is like in movies, like Django Unchained, or movies that are like historically based or something of that nature, where a white person, like an actor, has to say it. Blazing Saddles is another good example. I'll defend it in that too.
Did you ever hear the anecdote? I don't quite remember who it was. I think it was with Django Unchained and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
Yeah, he was like, I don't want to say it, like it's so hard for me. Like I'm really going through it. And Samuel L. Jackson was just like, just do your job.
Yes, I've heard that
Which
one.
is pretty good.
Yeah, and I'll also, another thing that I think is weird. Now, this is something that I find to be like too far. This is a wokeness has gone too far thing for me. Where a white person cannot mouth the N-word, or say the N-word while quoting a song, like on TikTok or in a YouTube video, or they can't admit to ever saying it in private when singing along to a song. That's weird to me.
Yeah, maybe. I think I'll let other white people fight over that one though.
That
It's
like to me,
okay, here's the thing about
so
racial
weird.
stuff. Like, you can't argue about this in public. Like, I'm not going to take a stance on this.
I mean, I will.
Okay, you do it.
I'll speak for you. Everything I say,
Right?
Josh
Don't. No,
agrees
no,
with
hold up.
when it comes to the N-word.
Everything
I
he
think white
says,
people,
I have the progressive version of whatever his position is.
oh, my position is not like regressive at all. Okay, like mine is the true neutral position, because like I mean, I had white friends that we grew up, we listened to rap music, and we used to rap along to Jay-Z or whatever black rappers we were listening to back then. Like the idea that I would like leave the room or leave the friendship because a friend of mine quoted a song that we both liked together that had the N-word in it, it's just like weird to me. Like I just couldn't imagine having that bother me. But the fact that there's people, like I remember there's this TikTok I saw where some kid was at a concert. I think it was a Kendrick Lamar concert or something. He got his scholarship and acceptance into college taken away because there was a video that came out that he like said the N-word while singing along to a song, and I was like, that's like weird, but like, is this where we're at now? Like we're actually saying you can't sing along to a song? I don't know.
Do you think that's a cultural change? Because I feel like there was once upon a time where pretty like esteemed professional type people, like you'd see like newscasters, like they would like quote someone saying the word and they would use the word in the quote, and that was considered like okay. And we've definitely moved to the point where like that is not considered acceptable, but that was kind of before both of our times, I think. Like 2000s.
Kind of, yeah, definitely the 2000s, because, and to me, I feel like that was like, that's neutral. I feel like that's the only time a white person is like
it makes sense.
Everyone should be okay with a white person using the word in that instance, because it's not their words, they're quoting someone else, or they're doing their job. Like, you know, like what what's his name? Like Samuel L. Jackson said to Leonardo DiCaprio. But yeah, but I bemoan the days where white people used to be able to say the N-word. But like in the 2000s,
that's what you just want to go back to, right?
I just want to go back to
when white people were just saying it, they were just spitting it out all the time.
But in the 2000s, not like in the 1960s.
The bombs. They're just dropping them.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's I don't know. I think that we're like very sensitive about racial issues right now. It's definitely become like such a focal point. And it's interesting to me because like you can look at some of these statistics, like looking at like the family like wealth gap between like black and white families, looking how it changes over time. And it turns out that like headlines of, you know, the income gap has decreased by 2% are really not like what make the news, but it's like all the bad stuff that does make the news. And I do think that we tend to sometimes forget like all of the progress we have made on a lot of these things, just because it's so much easier to and more interesting to talk about the bad stuff that still does happen.
Yeah, like when it comes to um oh god, I'm gonna sound like a real conservative now.
Oh boy.
Like I don't um like I see people talking about, like, when it comes to like racial issues and stuff, a lot of the times I see people talking about, like, black people specifically, um talking about cultural appropriation a lot of the times, or like white people doing black music and stuff like that, or using AAVE and people calling it Gen Z slang or
Mhm.
something like that. Where for me personally, I don't care for those conversations or for getting outraged about those things, because it's not the same thing as like police brutality, which is a real thing that's happening, or the criminal justice system, which is something that is actual concrete and has to do with the legal system, and we can actually change that through laws and actual politics. But complaining about Post Malone being a culture vulture is not really something that I can really get around, you know, feeling like, oh, this is just racism and it's the same as, or in the same fight with police brutality and stuff like that. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm probably explaining it in like a really
Yeah, I
weird
mean, it's
way, but
definitely not
like,
the same. I do feel like to some
but
extent
people,
I
but people
empathize
talk
a
about it
little,
as, yeah, sorry,
as
go
if it's
ahead.
like, as bad. Definitely, there's some people who get like totally frustrated. I think about like stupid things. Um, I understand to an extent, like the feeling of feeling like you don't have anything. You've got this like one thing. And then when other people kind of like adopt that thing, and then it's like, oh, like I don't have anything that's like special or exclusive to me. And I think sometimes I can't think of a specific example, but I've definitely had that thought regarding like trans stuff, where like there will be some sort of like behavior or thing that I associate with trans women, and then I'll see like cis women like appropriating that. I guess like femboys, like a lot of like AMAP people will present themselves as femboys and like they have fun with that or whatever. And then I'll see occasionally on TikTok or somewhere someone who's like born female but calls themselves a femboy, and like they just present like a girl, and it kind of feels like stolen valor to me, where it's like, okay, the point of like the femboy thing is that look how like unique this person is, that they look like a girl despite being male and like not being on hormones or whatever. That feels like stolen valor to me a little bit, where it's like you're not really in this group, and yet like you've taken this one thing. So I empathize with that feeling, but I also think that a lot of Americans do this weird thing where they try to like speak for entire groups. Um, so there was that like girl who went to her high school prom, and she wore a kipao, and it's this like beautiful dress that is like it got popular in China, and it's like very iconic. Kind of ironically, it's a dress that is based on Western fashion trends. So it was these like these rich ladies in Hong Kong and in southern China and even in Beijing were like looking at Western trends and were trying to like adopt them into their own culture. And now we have like white girls in the United States who are wearing the dresses, and people are like, my culture is not your costume. Don't do this. But then you have people in China who are like, no, this is amazing. Like, this is proof of like Chinese ascendancy and how powerful our culture is. So, like, I think the problem is not necessarily having that feeling. Like, you can have that feeling, and I think it's like okay to respect that and acknowledge that in yourself. But I also think that like you have to not allow that feeling to like cause you to speak for other people, or claim that like your view on the cultural exchange is something that is like objective or universal, because often it's not, and other people in your group will disagree with you.
And also the consistency in which you're going to apply that is not going to be there isn't going to be consistency in which they will apply their what is it, their anger or their objectification. I don't know. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but like, because to me, like when it comes to the cultural appropriation, when it comes to rap music, I don't think a lot of people tend to be consistent in what they consider to be appropriation or what is or isn't bad cultural appropriation. So they'll say Eminem is good because he respects Black people, he grew up with Black friends and in a Black area, and he always pays homage to the Black artists that came before him. But someone like Post Malone doesn't care about even calling themselves a rapper, doesn't really pay homage to people who did the hip hop before him, and doesn't really care about the culture itself, and just wants to make whatever music he likes, get paid for it, move on, blah blah blah. But the reason why I say that there's not consistency in which and why people on how people apply their outrages towards these different things is because there's Black rappers who are my age who are pretty much the same as Post Malone, where they don't really care that much about the rappers that came before them, nor do they care about paying homage to them, and they just want to make whatever money they can from the music, make whatever music they want to, however they want to, and then move on with their lives. So it's like, I don't really see, that's what I'm saying, like, there's not consistency with how people will apply these things, because just because they're not Black or they're not white, therefore it's this, therefore it's that, blah blah blah. It's just odd to see people do these things. And I'm saying this as someone who's an Eminem fan, and I'm not even a Post Malone fan or a Lil Yachty fan or someone of that nature.
I did see you posted on Twitter. You were like top rappers or something. I think Eminem was number one.
Yes. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you're a big Eminem fan.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I like Eminem because I can listen to Eminem and I can imagine that I'm like a 12-year-old boy who wears tap out and like eats Doritos and like fights his little brother. That's my dream. I think that like his lyricism and like people will make fun of Eminem for being corny, but I think that is like fun. Like when he's talking about like shoving like nails into people's eyeballs and he's like being really graphic, like it's fun. And I think that he's like very clever with sometimes like the stupidest wordplay ever, where like it sounds amazing, but he's like talking about like poop or something. And so I appreciate him for that reason. But I also understand when people are like, I don't like Eminem, because he's very different, I think, than other rappers in regards to, like what he focuses on, like the very like precise technical skill and the kind of humor and whatnot. It's definitely, I think, not for anyone, but he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, like I've been a fan of his forever, since I was like about 11 or 12, and I went through a period of time where I didn't listen to him as much because I was more into like metal and rock music, but then I kind of came back to rap music, and over the last year and a half or so I've been really into like golden era rap, so like mid 80s to early 90s, so like Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, Cool G Rap, Master Ace, Big Daddy Kane, those rappers, Rakim. And those are like the artists that he was mostly influenced by, right? So me getting into those artists made me love Eminem even more because I could see where he got his techniques from and where he got his flows from and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's kind of funny. Like I ended up becoming more of a rap fan in a way that I didn't think that I could be because I didn't think that I was able to really get into other rappers other than just Eminem and Insane Clown Posse. And
You're gonna get
Eminem,
roasted by hip hop heads, or I'm sure you do, just all the time.
I do, yes, of course I do, because I like honestly, I think Insane Clown Posse is a top 5 rap group. Like I think they're better than NWA. I don't I think the only rap group that I'm willing to say are better than Insane Clown Posse is Public Enemy.
Interesting.
And maybe nope, that's pretty much it. Like personally, that's where I'm at with that because a lot of other rap groups, they don't have as consistent, they don't have as long of a discography as they do, and the consistency isn't there, even if the length is, which I don't even think the length is there for a lot of these
Mhm.
different rap groups, except for maybe Public Enemy, when Public Enemy has the consistency at least.
So
Um,
it's like consistency in time in the game.
yes,
Like
yes,
Wu-Tang
because
Clan, they can drop some bangers, but they don't have as long of a track record.
exactly, because
Interesting.
in a lot of people, they'll tend to like I still see people say stuff like what is it people say? Um they'll take a band or a group that people do this in rock and metal a lot too, where they'll say like Rage Against the Machine is better than like Limp Bizkit. Limp Bizkit's the one I come to a lot. Like Limp Bizkit has more albums than them, and I think all of their albums are really good. Rage Against the Machine only had 4 albums, and one of those albums was a cover album. So I'm gonna go with Limp Bizkit just because, you know, a little bigger discography. Or Korn versus Metallica is the one I like doing the most. Where I think Korn has 14 albums now, 13 albums, something like that, and Metallica has, let's say, 11 or 10. But I don't think Metallica has as strong of discography as Korn does. Like Saint Anger's terrible, and I also don't think Metallica's first album is all that great either. Kill 'Em All is like disturbingly not good. um, but
I don't think I can argue like any music taste stuff.
what kind of music do you listen to?
I listen to all kinds of music, but I am like very inconsistent. Like I tend not to go super deep on artists or genres. Like there are people that I like. Like I really like Marvin Gaye. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there's like 4 songs of his that I really like the most that I tend to just like replay over and over. So I couldn't like debate about Marvin Gaye, and it's kind of like Rage Against the Machine, like their album. I think it's their debut album. I think it's like pretty good. I remember listening to it a lot when I was in high school. But like I don't know anything else about their discography, so I can't really like argue like, well, they've also got this album that's like incredible or whatever. Because I really just know like the popular stuff from a lot of people.
It's interesting. Like, you said you're 22, right?
I am.
Yeah, that's a very like I see with a lot of people, I would say about our age and younger. Like I don't I mean, I know I'm a Zoomer, but when I say Zoomer, it's pejorative and it means everyone born after like '02. Um but like a lot of people who listen to music who are like younger, that's kind of them, is that they don't really have a lot of specific artists that they're super into. It's more like they go on to Spotify and they listen to whatever playlist is there, or they have a playlist of songs that they really like, and it could be of artists that are in similar the same genre, but they don't really tend to get into albums or artists in the same way that I thought or think people my age and older definitely did. Because I remember I bought CDs whenever I was in high school and middle school. I know a lot of people didn't, but I know some people did, or at least even if we didn't buy the CDs, people still downloaded the album or they listened to the album that came out. But now people don't really do that as much anymore. They just kind of find a song, and if they like it, they do. If they don't, then they skip it.
Yeah, I think it's streaming platforms have just totally changed things because it's no longer like you're buying an album and the unit is an album. Now the unit is like individual songs. You can add them all together to your playlist a lot easier. So I think it's definitely changed things. It's also, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but like the music that people consume is so much more diverse now than it was in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, where a lot of like the big artists from those previous decades like way outsold even the biggest modern artists today. And it's because there was this like this sort of like fracturing of the cultural, consumption, where it used to be that like everyone and their mom consumed the same 5 people, and now it's like everyone consumes, such a wide variety of things. Part of that's the internet and like the ability for so many new bands to show up and market themselves. It has just totally changed, I think, the way that people consume music, where it's like very exploratory, and a lot of people don't take the time to really go deep on individual artist or genre. They're constantly like looking for other stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, because what is it? Like in rock music, like the fastest selling rock album of all time is Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water. It came out in October of 2000. I can't remember how many copies it sold. It sold like 1.7 million in its first week, something like that. I think that's what it was. But that's a record that is never going to go away because people don't buy albums like they used to anymore, and people don't listen to rock music as much as they used to. So Limp Bizkit's always going to hold that record forever, and I'll always hold it over other metalheads because haha. But like there's other types of records like that too that can't be broken because of the way that we consume music. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones from back then that aren't necessarily rock related, but
I mean, like
the
Michael
concept
Jackson, like
yes, Michael
he set
Jackson.
so many records.
I think Thriller went diamond in like 2 years or something. Diamond is selling 10 million copies of an album in like one country. I think it went diamond within like 2 years. Like albums don't go diamond anymore. Singles go diamond nowadays, but even with that, the way that streaming works, I can't remember how many times you have to stream a song before it counts as a sale, but it's so many times you have to stream something before it becomes a sale.
Yeah, they have that like really weird method of calculating things, right? Where it's like album equivalent units, and it's like however many streams counts as like an album sale.
Yeah, I feel like that's not, in a lot of ways, it's not really fair because back in the day, you could just buy a CD, listen to it once, and that's it, right? But that still counts as one sale of the CD or whatever. But now it's like, in order to have the equivalent of that, you'd have to listen to that album so many different times to be considered one sale. And I hate that because it's changed the way that albums can stay on the charts too. Because someone said, there's this account that I follow, it's called Hip Hop Numbers, where they said that Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid Mad City, I think it was Good Kid Mad City, yeah, has stayed on the top 200 Billboard album charts every week since it came out. No. Yeah, it was Good Kid Mad City. So over 11 years.
That's impressive. That's crazy.
And it's the only album to ever do something like that. I'm like, how does that work? Like, it's because of streaming. And something like that tells me that there's got to be a problem with the way that those things are calculated, because I mean, all respect to Kendrick Lamar, but that
But you
just
think
seems odd
Eminem
to
is
me.
the #1 rapper. So.
Well, true, but like but it's not even so much about like, oh, I just don't think Kendrick's all that.
So far,
It's
your
just
takes are white people should be able to say the N-word. And the #1 rapper is Eminem. So
oh, you don't want to know what I think about Insane Clown Posse. I think Insane Clown Posse's music is more anti-racist as a whole than anything Kendrick Lamar has ever put out, or
damn,
J. Cole.
damn.
It's just true, because most of Insane Clown Posse's songs are just them talking about killing racist people. Like, that's just it. Like, and they've been doing that for like 30 years. They have entire songs dedicated to killing like Confederate sympathizing Southerners, like a whole bunch of songs just about shitting on the Confederate flag. Like, they're ahead of their time in terms of like being against racism as like, you know, a white like fan base, majority fan base that is considered a whole bunch of racist people. It's so weird how people paint their fan base as all racist white people. I'm like, no. In fact, I've probably met very few white people that were fans of ICP. Most of the people I met that were fans of ICP were Native American, Latino, and
Interesting.
Black. But either way, I don't know how we got there.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have one question from the chat.
Yes.
I've never listened to ICP, so I cannot
Are you
grill you on this,
serious?
unfortunately. Yeah, never. So maybe I got to change that. They ask, will you ask him to address the homophobia that ICP incorporates into their music? I'm curious how he feels about that.
So they are not as bad with the homophobia as like Eminem was back in the day, or currently is. Because even when I'm looking at some of their older stuff back in the day, in terms of homophobia, it's not as, I can't even pick out that many homophobic lines from their older stuff. I know there's that one line in, what's that one song? It's on the Ringmaster. But their homophobia was not like as bad. Not saying that it's not bad, but like they're not as known for their homophobia in their music compared to
people.
Eminem. Yeah, because I'm sitting here thinking about like Eminem, like there's a laundry list of homophobia and all of his stuff. Because even ICP in later years, because unlike Eminem, ICP, they've even come back later on and said that a lot of the stuff that they said in their older stuff, they don't really like some of the homophobia, and they've been made it a point to say that they don't support homophobia, and that's why the whole what is it? The whole Juggalo thing is supposed to be people from all different walks of life coming together and being like a family, and they've denounced homophobia and stuff like that. But as far as their music, I don't think it shows up as much even in their older stuff.
What about us?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, it's not even like what about us.
He's like, there's so many worse artists.
Well, there is, because I think in terms of ICP, they're not at I'm blanking on. I'm not blank. It's not even so much blanking. It's just there's not as much that exists in their earlier stuff.
I do have a playlist on Spotify called 2000s era misogyny that slaps. So maybe I'm not one to speak. But it's got some Eminem. It's got Hollywood Undead.
Hollywood
Falling in Reverse. Yeah. All of these artists who they had frontmen who were probably Me Too'd by now, who are like singing about like slapping women up and like fucking them. And I'm like, yeah, gotta get into that.
Yes. So Falling in Reverse, were you like one of those people that in high school you listened to like Sleeping with Sirens and Pierce the Veil and stuff like that, or
Not
like
really. No. I had
okay,
like I don't even remember what my tastes were in high school. I think they were weird. Um, like very random stuff. I liked Kanye a lot. He was my number one artist for many years.
including last year, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
including every he just goes even higher on my chart. Actually, last year was the only year that he wasn't on there, I think. So yeah, crazy. How the times change.
Yeah, I was never too into Kanye. I mean I like some of the songs, but the only album of his that he had anything to do with that I was like super into was the Good Music Cruel Summer, I think it was, like compilation that came out in 2012. It
Was
had
it
like
a
Mercy.
collaboration with someone?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it
I think
was with
I know what you're
his
talking
music
about.
label, like Good Music, and it had the song Mercy on it, New God Flow,
Oh,
um,
interesting.
the Don't Like remix with Chief Keef. Um, like I listened to that all the time. But that stuff is really good.
That's cool.
Um, but yeah, but I listened back in high school. It was like started out with like rap, so it was like Eminem, ICP, D12, that kind of stuff, and then it ended up being rock and metal. So like in Park, Limp Bizkit, Korn, Slipknot, Lacuna Coil, um, Emir, stuff like that. I didn't really like I like Falling in Reverse now, but back then I was really into that kind of stuff, like Bring Me the Horizon, Ask Alexandria. I had
I've
to
definitely
learn to
listened
like
to
that stuff.
Bring Me the Horizon. My dad was into folk punk,
Hmm.
and he showed me Days and Days when I was like 14 or something. And I was like, this is so revolutionary. This is edgy. I was a depressed teen, so I was like, I'm so into this. So I liked that. I would listen to artists. There was this like one trans artist on Bandcamp, and they had like songs like Dysphoria, like blues and Dysphoria Days and stuff like that. Where like they were just so. I was into something called anti-folk, and it's like a lot of people in their basements who are like trying to make the worst song imaginable. And yeah, that was my shit. So
And where did you grow up at or around?
I
Like
grew
where,
up
like in?
in Colorado.
Oh, okay. So we're neighbors,
Yeah,
kind
Oklahoma.
of. Yeah, you're the place where people move to after you legalize weed. We lost like
True.
half our state's population. Not half, but like we did lose some people because of that.
It's funny because I'm living in Austin right now. Grew up in Colorado, and I visited home with my girlfriend a few times, and we walk around, and like the vibes between my hometown and between Austin are just like so similar. Um, Even though they're like vastly different in scale, it's this like kind of like bluish like island in like a sea of red, and um I think we saw like multiple like license plates and like little shirts and stuff that like referenced Austin specifically. So we've got this running joke that there's a Austin to Colorado pipeline and people just move there.
Um, oh, so now you're in Texas, so we're still technically
Still
neighbors.
neighbors.
But now I'm the objectively better neighbor because I'm
Whoa.
Oklahoma.
Okay, fighting
Yeah,
words.
because it's Oklahoma and you're Texas, and Texas is bad
Damn. Harsh. Why is Texas bad?
because it's just the truth. You
Okay.
know, there's
Can't
there's
argue with
only
that.
been there's only been like three good people to ever come from Texas, maybe like ever, and one of them was Lyndon Johnson, you know, the president,
Hmm. He had a big
and
dick.
exactly that he put the
That's all I know. He passed a lot of legislation, had a big dick. That's all.
yeah, Yeah, well, but there's this what was it? This political planes four square axis thing where it said what was it? Past Social Security, said the N-word, uh showed his penis to staffers or something, and then like was from the South or something like that. I was like, see
And it's just
that's
him right in the middle.
yes, it's him. It's like that's the man right there.
See, I'm so
Yeah.
terrible with history and like stuff like that. Um, like I vaguely know like a few facts about presidents, but it's really bad.
But you
Like,
knew that about Lyndon Johnson. Not that he passed civil rights or anything or gave black people
no,
voting rights,
I knew that he
but you know
was.
he had a big dick. That's it. That's all you need
No,
to
I
know.
said legislatively successful and also had a big dick. It's not a lot. Like I don't know what year he was elected in.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't. I don't. So yeah, the history is not my strong suit.
It's wild.
Okay,
But
what year
no.
was he elected in?
Well, I mean, technically he was only elected 1 year to a full term. It was 64, but he was JFK's VP.
Damn. Okay.
So when the JFK, when JFK tapped out, he took over for the last 2 years of
Okay.
that term. Does it really say tapped out?
Tapped out. Yeah, he
We'll
went.
just go with that one. We'll go
Yeah.
with
Okay.
that one.
Okay, you're correct. Good job.
Yeah. Well, I'm a history major, so
Served
I
as
have to know
the
it.
36th president of the United States from 1963 to 1969,
Yeah.
and then was previously vice president. See, I didn't know that he was previously vice president.
Yeah, and he
That's
was
how.
also majority leader in the Senate before then.
Hmm.
Because I don't know, it's so weird back then. Like you could pretty much you could be majority leader of like the Senate and then also be expected to potentially run for president one day. Like now we see that as the final frontier for anybody in the House and the Senate is like you get to be in House or Senate leadership, then that's it. But back then it was, oh, you could be in House and Senate leadership and still be expected to potentially run for president one day. Like we don't see that
I
with Chuck Schumer now. We don't think he's going to be running for president anytime soon.
huh.
But yeah,
Yeah, I guess not. But like, I didn't know that that was the thought. Was it a thought of like if you get to be like a leader in the House or Senate, then like the next step for you is to run for presidency? Was that seen as like a natural development?
I think it was seen as a potential thing,
Okay.
not so
But
much
it is like a
a
potential thing now, right? Like if Chuck Schumer like ran,
sure.
that wouldn't like blow my mind. I'd be like,
I
okay.
I think today most people see those things as the last thing you want to do. Like that's the thing you aspire to be is the minority or majority leader in the House or the Senate or the Speaker of the House. And then that's your retirement is after you got to do that, you're done. Like, but back in the day, it's like we've had people who were president and then they got to be on the Supreme Court. We joke about Biden appointing Obama to the Supreme Court, but we know that would never happen, even though, I mean, it could. I mean, he's not unqualified to be on the Supreme Court. He was a lawyer. Being president, I feel like makes you notable about law stuff. I don't know. I don't know. It's just weird how it is these days with that. Also, LBJ, he died when he was 64. So he got to do all of that before he was 64. While Chuck Schumer, I think, was like elected to the Senate when he was like 64 or something. That's the other thing is we've also just aged up all of our political leaders by like 30 years
Yeah,
when
which
it comes
is
to
crazy to me.
yeah.
Do you think that is just an outgrowth of the fact that you have such a large, like older electorate in the United States?
Yes and no. I think it's because of the boomers and the
Right.
effect that they had politically and and economically. And not just boomers, but I think it's a sweet spot of people born from like 1940, which includes some silent gens, and people born to like 1969-ish. Because if you look at it, that span of about almost 30 years worth of people, those are the bulk of people who are in power, which includes all the years of boomers and then early Xers and then late silent gen. Those are the people that had it pretty much, they had the golden years of capitalism, as they say, or whatever the American dream was.
A huge generation and was
Yeah.
super politically influential. I think that as the boomers phase out of relevancy, as they, quite frankly, as they die, we'll probably see like the millennials achieve ascendancy. Are you familiar with Peter Zeihan, I think his name is?
The name sounds familiar.
I think he got really popular recently because of his political analysis regarding the Ukraine and Russian war. And he's like a pretty like, I would say like pro-Ukrainian person. Like I don't think he's like biased, but he definitely is like, this is why I think it's good to support Ukraine and da da da. He's like, I think sort of liberal, but a big part of his analysis is like demographic. And so he talks a lot about like geopolitics through the lens of geography and demography. And his analysis of places like China is that their population bulge is just going to lead to like massive societal issues in the next few decades, which I think seems very plausible. And I think that we've seen like some of his ideas, they seem to have like pretty good explanatory power. But one of the interesting things about the United States is that like our birth rate is a lot higher than a lot of the developed world, and thanks in part to people like the Mormons or the Amish, these like religious groups in the United States that are still having kids. And so it's interesting to me to imagine like future generations and what their viewpoints will be, because I would guess that there's probably going to be in the future a really big conservative pendulum swing, or not even pendulum swing, because I don't know if we'll continually go more right wing or whatever, but there will eventually be a generation that is like disproportionately from this religious stock, and I think that'll be interesting to see.
I've never really thought about that.
I don't know if you're familiar. Also, there's studies on like twins and stuff about like the political opinions and of twins and their heritability. So like how heritable are political views. And it turns out that like genetics is like a very good predictor for whether or not you're going to be conservative or liberal.
Genetics themselves, not the raising of the child or children, but the genetics.
And it's like, I believe that Jonathan Haidt has a lot of work on this, specifically in like the values that people will have. So like, if you're someone who values care and harm versus someone who like values liberty and hierarchy and fairness, all of these things that like conservatives tend to value a little bit more than liberals, those values seem to be associated with this like heritability, right? So like you could in theory be like a conservative who like really cares about like the care harm principle. There's nothing like against that, or a liberal who's like really into like hierarchy. Those are like possible positions you could have, but I think they're just like a little bit less likely, and it probably has something to do with something genetic. It's like xenophobia is also something that has like a genetic root, and it's also related to this like sanctity principle or value that people have, where like and also discuss sensitivity and conscientiousness. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but like all
Yeah.
of these concepts are sort of grouped, and like it turns out that like how sensitive someone is to disgust is something that is probably genetic. And then also, if you increase someone's disgust sensitivity, or if you trigger it and then have them take a political test, they will become more homophobic and more xenophobic. So if you expose them to like a bad smell, they'll become more homophobic. Very interesting. But it does seem like there is some genetic component and like these very core values that we kind of build our opinions out of.
So, so therefore, if that's the case, would that mean that if, like in certain states, in certain states, if the genetic makeup of someone is different and their genetic makeup would be kind of predisposed to conservative views, but it's a like blue left-leaning state, would that mean that the messaging of the politicians in that state could have an effect on them to turn them into voting the opposite way that their genetics would predispose them to?
Yeah. I believe actually Jonathan Haidt addresses this specifically, where he talks about like if Democrats want to run candidates in very red states, they need to tailor their platforms and the way that they talk about their platforms to the values that conservatives have that are sort of like underlying. And so it is like, how can we reframe things away from like the care harm principles that liberals usually talk about and towards like values of hierarchy, equality, fairness and liberty and all of those things, right? Which, not to say liberals don't have those values necessarily. I think they're just like the balance is different, basically. And conservatives tend to be like very flat across the board, where they like evenly value all of these 6 things, versus liberals tend to care a lot about 3 of them, which I think is like fairness and liberty and care and harm. But yeah, super interesting stuff.
Yeah, I want to look into that a little bit more, because I do think that, because I had to think about this whenever I was running for office or in for this state house, where I had to think about phrasing certain things that I wanted to talk about, whether it be certain policies, in the way that I know most people in my district tend to think of them, or tend to think of things as like first principle things. So like if they care about, let's say, what is it? What was it? Not being reliant on the government or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the way to talk about that for me is talk about how we need to have higher wages, and stuff like that, because people are less concerned with telling businesses what to do if it has to do with like the workers themselves, when it comes to raising their wages and stuff like that. People are less concerned with that whole aspect as they used to be 10-15 years ago, because I remember back in the day it used to be Republican voters were even against raising the minimum wage and stuff like that. We're making arguments towards that, but now they're okay with those things. It's more about the amount that you raise it to, or the mechanism in which you go about doing it. And so talking about those types of things versus just simply saying the government should do XYZ, those types of conversations and messaging is going to be more effective. think I'm saying what I'm saying correctly.
Yeah,
But
I
do you
mean,
get what I'm saying?
I think
Yeah.
I do. I think there's this like fight over the middle class and the working class, and that fight like occurs on the battleground of values. And so like I think we've seen this shift where the Republicans have gotten like very good, and with like the election of Trump, the Republicans were very good at targeting working class people, especially in the Rust Belt. And like winning those demographics was hugely important. And one of the ways you win those demographics is by appealing to like some of these more collectivist values, right? Rather than like this traditional republicanism, which is all about like big business and the individual and like, you know, just like slashing taxes, getting out like all of this regulation. That happened, of course, to some extent under Trump, but a lot of the messaging became like very populist. And I think that is like the Republicans got good at marketing themselves towards more populist values. And that was a big win for them. But I think that Democrats naturally will return fire, especially in red states where they learn to market themselves to the working class in those states. I will say, I do got to get going. It's been an hour-ish, I think.
Yep.
But it's been lovely.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Hopefully we can talk again sometime because this was really great.
For sure. I enjoyed it.
I'll
have a
chat
good
with
one.
you later.
All right.
Recording stopped.
What a nice young man. I enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed the music talk, even though I can't add that much. I enjoyed the conversation about the N-word. I thought that was fun and a good opportunity to have some memes. And I enjoyed our politics talk. So I'm gonna head out. I am gonna do an interview with a very interesting person named Pariah the Doll coming up soon that I'm really looking forward to. So look forward to that, guys.